But you also know that artificial intelligence is not without its risk, and that you have to be very transparent about how those algorithms are constructed. How do you see artificial intelligence, more specifically, dealing with the ecosystem by helping to get consumer insights, but also keeping consumer privacy safe?
Senator, I think the core question you're asking about AI transparency is a really important one that people are just starting to very seriously study, and that's ramping up a lot. And I think this is going to be a very central question for how we think about AI systems over the next decade and beyond. Right now, a lot of our AI systems make decisions in ways that people don't really understand.
Right.
And I don't think that in 10 or 20 years in the future that we all want to build, we want to end up with systems that people don't understand how they're making decisions. So doing the research now.
This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Bret Baier. You've been watching Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg's testimony on Capitol Hill for the last few hours. We'll keep monitoring the hearing and bring you updates as warranted. Plus, we'll have a full wrap of the day on the Hill for Zuckerberg in just a minute. But there is a lot of other breaking news to cover tonight, starting down the street at the White House. The man who became famous for saying "you're fired" is facing what could be the most serious and consequential personnel decision of his life tonight. Both supporters and detractors of President Trump are now openly talking about what might happen if the president decides to pull the plug on the investigation being conducted by special counsel Robert Mueller. The talk on Capitol Hill comes as the president lashes out about a Monday raid directed at his longtime personal attorney. All of this, of course, as the president of the United States also prepares to decide about possible U.S. military action against Syria for chemical attacks there. Another busy news night here on Special Report. We begin again on the North Lawn with Chief White House Correspondent John Roberts. Good evening, John.
Bret, good evening to you. The raid on the president's personal attorney Michael Cohen's two offices, his residence and his temporary hotel room, represents a steep escalation of the Russia investigation by the Justice Department, one that President Trump has taken as a personal affront and left uncertain what he plans to do next.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Asked again whether President Trump had any thoughts or intentions about firing Robert Mueller, for the first time today, the press secretary did not issue a denial.
You've said several times from the podium that the president has neither the intention nor is thinking about firing Robert Mueller. Does that remain the case today?
The president was asked this question directly last night, and I'd refer you back to his comments.
What the president said last night was sharply different than what he has said in the past, when he has insisted he was not going to fire Mueller.
Why don't I just fire Mueller? Well, I think it's a disgrace what's going on. We'll see what happens.
Sources close to the president say they don't believe he'll fire Mueller. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley today said it would be a terrible idea.
It would be suicide for the president to want to talk about firing Mueller.
But in the event President Trump wanted to fire Mueller, the White House made it clear.
He has the power to do so, but I don't have any further announcements.
No question, the president is livid about the FBI raids on his personal attorney, Michael Cohen. Sources say the FBI took everything in Cohen's possession, including privileged documents and communications, computers and cell phones. President Trump warned last year that Robert Mueller's investigation should not stray outside its mandate.
It's an attack on our country in a true sense. It's an attack on what we all stand for.
To hear the press secretary tell it, President Trump now believes Mueller has crossed a line.
The president has been clear that he thinks that this has gone too far.
The Senate Minority Leader heaped criticism on the president's complaints today, insisting the raid was signed off on by a number of officials who President Trump appointed.
If President Trump believes this to be a partisan conspiracy, he once again ignores the fact that every major player is a Republican.
It's still unclear what the FBI was looking for. Bank fraud regarding the payment to Stormy Daniels has been suggested. Sources tell Fox News Cohen paid Daniels from an existing home equity line of credit and that he didn't need to tell the bank what the money was for. The $130,000 was then transferred to an LLC solely owned by Cohen and from there wired to an attorney in Beverly Hills. President Trump denies any knowledge of the transaction.
Did you know about the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels?
President Trump is also weighing options to respond to the suspected chemical attack in Syria, huddling last night with his national security team, talking with French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Theresa May. The president today canceled his weekend trip to Peru and Colombia, indicating a response could come toward the end of the week.
We're going to continue to work with a number of our partners and allies as we determine what the next best steps are.
Defense Secretary James Mattis also canceled weekend plans to travel to Nevada and San Francisco in order to be ready at a moment's notice to respond to the president's call. We also have heard that while the United States and its allies are still working to confirm whether, in fact, chemical weapons were used in the attack, the White House remains confident that they were. The press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, again saying today that the White House is fully confident with what it has said so far on the matter. Bret?
John Roberts live in the North Lawn. John, thank you. The president also talking to the French president and the British prime minister today. Meantime, Syrian government forces are watching the skies tonight as fears grow of a U.S. military strike. Correspondent Connor Powell has that story from our Middle East newsroom.
With a U.S. strike against the Assad regime looming, Syria is on high alert tonight. Government troops taking defensive measures throughout the country and preparing to defend the Air Force and military bases. This comes as Russian soldiers visited the site of Saturday's alleged chemical attack on opposition forces in Duma, an attack both Moscow and Damascus claim did not happen. In an apparent effort to stave off a U.S. retaliatory strike, both countries are now inviting chemical weapons experts to visit Duma.
We have invited experts from the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. We cannot blindly believe results that are produced by investigations from a distance.
In the past, an inspection team's access to chemical attack sites has been stalled by the Syrian regime, and worse, they've been attacked in the field while trying to conduct their investigations. Few in the West believe Russia and Syria are genuine in their desire to investigate this latest attack.
It is shocking, I have to say, that after so many international discussions and condemnations, that chemical weapons are used again and again.
With tensions rising, the Pentagon telling Fox News that Russia has recently successfully jammed the GPS system on some U.S. surveillance drones in Syria. However, Russia has not succeeded in jamming the larger missile-carrying Reaper drone.
Well, just in the last few hours, the United Nations Security Council blocked a Russian proposal to create a new organization that would investigate chemical weapons attacks. Ambassador Nikki Haley said that this new organization would not be independent and would allow Russia veto over any investigative findings. Bret?
Connor Powell in Jerusalem. Connor, thank you. President Trump's Homeland Security advisor is resigning. Tom Bossert was a point person in the White House on protecting the nation from terror and cyber threats. He also helped spearhead the Trump administration's response to last year's hurricanes in Texas, Florida, and Puerto Rico. His departure comes at the request of the new National Security Advisor, John Bolton. Press Secretary Sarah Sanders says the president's grateful for Bossert's commitment to the safety and security of the country. As you've been watching, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is still testifying before lawmakers on Capitol Hill tonight. Right now, the hearing's in a short break. Zuckerberg spent much of the afternoon repeatedly falling on his multi-billion-dollar sword in front of senators, anxious to be seen as defending the privacy rights of their constituents. A long day of testimony, some interesting exchanges. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel has the latest tonight from the Hill. Good evening, Mike.
Well, Bret, good evening to you. Mark Zuckerberg says he is open to making changes to Facebook, and the tech CEO says the buck stops with him.
We didn't take a broad enough view of our responsibility, and that was a big mistake. And it was my mistake, and I'm sorry.
The stakes are incredibly high for Mark Zuckerberg. Facebook has an estimated 2.2 billion users, and he's facing lawmakers for the first time after it was revealed 87 million users had their data unknowingly shared with Cambridge Analytica.
We considered it a closed case. In retrospect, that was clearly a mistake. We shouldn't have taken their word for it, and we've updated our policies and how we're going to operate the company to make sure that we don't make that mistake again.
Some senators warned Facebook better fix it, or Congress will.
Let me just cut to the chase. If you and other social media companies do not get your act in order, none of us are going to have any privacy anymore.
The line of questioning bounced around during the hearing as some Democrats focused on when Zuckerberg and his team knew about Russian attempts to influence the 2016 election.
The campaign included ads and false information to create discord and harm Secretary Clinton's campaign. And the content was seen by an estimated 157 million Americans.
The Facebook CEO talked about efforts to make sure that never happens again.
The nature of these attacks, though, is that, there are people in Russia whose job it is to try to exploit our systems and other internet systems and other systems as well. So this is an arms race. Right? I mean, they're going to keep on getting better at this, and we need to invest in keeping on getting better at this, too.
Texas Senator Ted Cruz asked Zuckerberg if Facebook was guilty of media bias.
Are you aware of any ad or page that has been taken down from Planned Parenthood?
Senator, I'm not, but let me just...
How about MoveOn.org?
Sorry?
How about MoveOn.org?
I'm not specifically aware of those.
How about any Democratic candidate for office?
I'm not specifically aware. I mean, I'm not sure.
Zuckerberg was greeted on Capitol Hill with approximately 100 giant cardboard cutouts of him wearing a T-shirt saying, "Fix Facebook." Zuckerberg confirmed for the first time that Facebook has been working with special counsel Robert Mueller's probe. The CEO says he has not personally spoken with members of Mueller's team. Bret?
Mike Emanuel, just outside the hearing. Mike, thanks. As we said, if anything else happens of note, we will bring it to you here on Fox. Meantime, Chinese President Xi Jinping is promising to cut his country's auto tariffs and improve intellectual property protection. The moves are seen as concessions amid the worsening trade dispute with the U.S. However, also tonight, China has filed a complaint with the World Trade Organization, the WTO, challenging President Trump's tariff hike on imported steel and aluminum. The China tariff news seemed to invigorate Wall Street today. The Dow surged 429. The S&P 500 gained 44. The Nasdaq jumped 144 today. National Guard members have started arriving at the U.S.-Mexico border. The Republican governors of Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico have committed some 1,600 Guard members to the president's latest immigration control effort. National correspondent William Lajeunesse reports tonight from Phoenix.
A week after President Trump asked for 4,000 National Guardsmen to secure the border, 3 states answered the call: New Mexico, Texas, and Arizona.
I'm here to announce the deployment of the National Guard to the border.
But other states like Oregon and Montana refused to offer their guard to serve, while California Governor Jerry Brown says he's still reviewing the president's request. If he refuses, the president does have the authority to nationalize the guard, typically used when troops are sent overseas or to national disasters.
The easiest thing to do would be to choose to put them on a Title X status, but with almost 500,000 folks in the National Guard across the country, the easier thing to do is to work with states who are willing to serve.
But deployment doesn't necessarily mean arrival. National Guard officials say there's paperwork, processing, medical checkups. Where will they live? Most important, matching skills to Border Patrol needs will determine where each guardsman will be sent. That, officials say, takes time.
We're looking at a request for assistance up to about 500 to 600 individual augmentees who will help us put badges back to the border. That's the whole goal of this mission.
In Santa Teresa, New Mexico, a primary corridor for drugs and human smuggling, the Border Patrol welcomes the help.
They have a variety of capabilities that we can use, particularly things like aerial detection are important to us given the size of the border.
The National Guard is sending drones and helicopters to track and apprehend immigrants. Larger Blackhawks can drop agents in remote canyons, a capability the patrol has in short supply.
When you look at the engineering things that need to be done, the grubbing operations, clearing roads, all that, we're looking at how we package those capabilities together.
Guardsmen will also monitor multiple video feeds that come in from cameras, sensors, and radar.
Do we stop the flow of illegal drugs? Do we stop the flow of human trafficking? Can we stop illegal migrants from coming over? Those will be the numbers that are the measurements.
A very provocative move, but at the same time, it's not really solving the problem.
So if history is any guide, enforcement in one area tends to push illegal traffic to another, meaning could the Guard in Arizona and Texas basically redirect smugglers to the sanctuary of California? Posing the question, would the president send or federalize troops in the Golden State over the governor's objection?
Bret?
William Lajeunesse, live in Phoenix. William, thank you. Up next, we will talk exclusively with the federal prosecutor now in charge of getting sensitive Justice Department documents to lawmakers investigating alleged FBI and DOJ bias against the president. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 25 in Oklahoma City, as classes remained empty in the state's biggest school districts today on this, the 7th day of a teacher's strike. Leaders of Oklahoma's largest teachers union demand a repeal of a capital gains tax exemption and a veto of a repeal of a proposed lodging tax. Governor Mary Fallin has already approved teacher pay raises of about $6,100, but many educators now saying their classrooms need more money. Fox 10 in Phoenix, as police say all 6 people aboard a small plane were killed when it crashed on a golf course shortly after taking off from a nearby airport. The identities of those killed in the Monday night crash in Scottsdale have not been released. And this is a live look at Philadelphia from our affiliate, Fox 29. One of the big stories there tonight, Bill Cosby's lawyer launching a fierce attack on the comedian's accuser in his opening statement of Cosby's sexual assault retrial. The attorney calls the woman a con artist who took advantage of Cosby's grief and loneliness over his son's murder to gain his trust before framing him. The previous trial ended in a hung jury. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. A federal prosecutor from Chicago is now in charge of turning over subpoenaed Justice Department documents to congressional committees investigating alleged bias against President Trump. It is the latest move in what has been a highly contentious process. Tonight, we welcome the U.S. Attorney in charge of this, John Lausch. Thanks for being here.
Thanks. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Let's start by asking you, where are we now? How many of these documents have been turned over?
Okay, so there's a handful of documents that have been turned over. There's several thousand pages, but I think the key at this point is really identifying, what additional relevant information is out there, turning it over as quickly as we can, and doing so as completely as we can given the legal obligations that exist. And there are certain legal obligations that we have as prosecutors which prevent us providing some documents like grand jury material, things like that. But that's really where we're at in the process.
What is the total scope of what you're looking at? How many total documents?
Okay, so, and there's been some kind of little misnomer about the documents that are out there. One of the numbers that's out there is, I think, 1.2 million. And that's the entire universe of materials that went to the Inspector General. But the number of relevant documents is going to be much less than that. How much less than that? I don't know. I might anticipate a lot less than that for various reasons. But, one of my jobs is to figure out what are those relevant documents, to work with the people that are reviewing them now, and to ensure that we get them produced as quickly as we can.
Chairman Goodlatte basically asked for everything the IG was given from the FBI, right?
Well, what the IG was given from the FBI as it relates
to the
Clinton matter. Exactly.
All right, so
exactly.
Our Justice Department producer tells me that sources familiar with this process say if you look at the Clinton investigation, the number goes down from 1.2 million to about 400,000. Is that right?
Right. It goes down a lot less. I'm not prepared to say what that number is yet. I'm just getting started. But I think it goes down substantially.
And if you do basic word searches, it goes down even more.
Right. And that's the hope, is really figure out the way to identify the most relevant materials as quickly as we can to get Congress what it's entitled to, so they can do their job.
The FBI director, Chris Wray, said on March 27th, I'm doubling the number of assigned FBI staff for a total of 54 to cover 2 shifts per day from 8 a.m. to midnight to expedite completion of this project. It is April 10th, 15 days later. You have Capitol Hill up in arms that they can't get these documents. There's frustration up there. There's frustration from the president. What is taking so long?
Right. So, I mean, based on my experience, both as a prosecutor and then in private practice beforehand, I mean, document reviews, they can just take time. And one of the reasons that they take some time is, kind of reviewing all of the materials to look for relevance, but then to figure out what materials need to be redacted out of there. And so the additional folks that have been added is going to be helpful.
Understanding that you're just coming on,
right.
But I mean, you understand this process has been going on for a long time.
Right.
Up until you.
Right.
All right, here's Trey Gowdy up on Capitol Hill.
And if there's a national security issue, we want it redacted. But most of what they send us now looks like an ink blot test. I want to be able to support the FBI and DOJ. But the world's premier law enforcement agency can't seem to operate a damn copying machine. We are tired of being patient.
So you hear that frustration.
Right. Yep, absolutely. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm here, is to address that specific frustration. I look forward to meeting the congressman tomorrow. I've met some other congressmen today in order to deal with exactly that issue. I think the redaction issue is an issue that we just need to confront head on and talk about why certain things are redacted and find a way to give them faith that what they're getting is the right information, and if there are redactions there, to explain what that is and why they're not entitled to receive it.
Right, and the president's tweet is, what does the Department of Justice, the FBI, have to hide? Why aren't they giving the strongly requested documents unredacted to the House Judiciary Committee? Stalling, but for what reason? Not looking good. Have you heard from the White House on this issue?
I have not. I have not. Earlier today, I met with the Attorney General, I met with the Deputy Attorney General, I met with the General Counsel of the FBI. It's very clear that my direction is to ensure that we get the documents produced as quickly as we can. We do so completely under the laws, and we do so with integrity and professionalism.
Do you look at the substance of those documents as far as the there? I mean, as a prosecutor?
Right. Well, I mean, as far as my job I think is going to be a lot about process, part of which will be the redactions, right? And we're going to want to give them as much as we can, because Congress has a very important job to do here, and we want them to do that. We need them to look at these documents in order to do their job. So we'll look at the substance in order to determine, are the redactions appropriate.
Right. Lastly, do you have any indication when the IG is going to come forward with his report?
I do not.
But do you expect it before you finish the process of getting documents up to Capitol Hill?
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, listen, we appreciate the answers that you have been able to provide, and thanks for the time.
Right. Thanks for having me.
Okay.
Take care.
When we come back, the latest on the U.S. response to the chemical attack in Syria. Our top story at the bottom of the hour. President Trump has canceled a trip to a summit meeting in South America to focus on the U.S. response to last weekend's alleged chemical attack on Syrian rebels. The president is calling Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad an animal. He's also accusing Russian President Vladimir Putin of complicity. Well, now a look back at policy. Correspondent Rich Edson shows us how we got to this point from the State Department tonight.
It began with protests in 2011, and it drags on. The Syrian civil war has invited rebel groups, terrorist organizations, and U.S. allies and adversaries, killing nearly 500,000 civilians, while millions more have lost their homes or fled the country. Throughout this destruction, the United States has debated its involvement, with little consensus beyond an assessment that Syria is a mess. President Obama's National Security Council spokesperson Tommy Vietor says, quote, the Obama administration, the international community, handed Trump an incredibly difficult situation in Syria with no great options. But the reality is Assad has been killing innocent civilians with impunity for 6 or 7 years now. For the U.S., Syria presents a complicated challenge. Defeating ISIS, countering Russia and Iran, both allies of the Assad regime, while somehow promoting stability. By the summer of 2011, then-President Obama declared the time had come for Assad to step aside. 1 year later, he set a threshold for deeper U.S. military involvement in Syria.
A red line for us is we start seeing a whole bunch of chemical weapons moving around or being utilized. That would change my calculus. 1
year after that, Assad crosses that line. A preliminary U.S. government report says the Assad regime killed more than 1,400 Syrians in a gas attack. President Obama decided against a unilateral airstrike. He deferred to Congress and eventually focused U.S. air power on ISIS in Syria. To remove Assad's chemical weapons, the U.S. turned to Assad's ally, Russia, securing an agreement.
There can be no games, no room for avoidance, or anything less than full compliance by the Assad regime.
Though the United Nations determined chemical attacks continued. Tommy Vietor tweeted, quote, shipping out 1,300 metric tons of weapons-grade chemicals was a major development. Obviously, they didn't get it all. Chlorine wasn't covered. Trump was handed a mess, but also hasn't deterred Assad. Last April, another chemical attack in northern Syria. Days later, the Trump administration struck the Assad regime. Officials say the next U.S. response in Syria, whatever it is, would be coordinated as administration officials continue discussions with European allies. Bret.
Rich Edson live at the State Department. Rich, thank you. London's mayor is declaring war on knives. The British capital is in the midst of a murder surge, and since guns are already rare there, the weapon of choice appears to be the knife. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott has this story tonight from London.
Usually civilized London has a problem, a soaring murder rate. In fact, in February and March, more people were killed in London than in New York City. One of the solutions, according to London's mayor, Sadiq Khan, more knife control. Tweeting this past weekend, "No excuses. There is never a reason to carry a knife. Anyone who does will be caught, and they will feel the full force of the law." The UK already has some of the strictest gun laws around. Of some 55 murders in London this year, 35 of them have been stabbings. Officials are calling for stricter enforcement of knife restrictions on carrying certain size knives in the street, for example. Others want more limits, including on mail-order knives.
Weapon searches have increased. Weapon seizures have increased. That's what I'm really focusing on. I anticipate they will continue to increase.
Outside observers, including gun rights advocates in the States, see laws on knives as a slippery slope of government regulation. There is also a lot of talk here about stopping the criminals themselves. Stop and search laws have been sharply curtailed.
I stand fully behind stop and search, and I see it as a vital tool for the police.
Also, with 20% government cuts, including on the police force, there's bobbies on the beat. An extra 300 police daily are being deployed to go after criminals, including those with knives.
I believe the government have blood in their hands because of the austerity and the lack of funding they put in public.
Still, however the murders are committed with guns or knives, London has a way to go to match crime levels in places like New York City. Last year, 290 people were killed in New York, 134 in London. Bret.
Greg Palcott in London. Greg, thank you. So how would you react to a ban on knives? Do you think there will be an increase in the National Knife Association or Hunting Knife Association now? Let me know on Twitter at Bret Baier and use the hashtag special report, or on Facebook at facebook.com/BretBaierSR. Up next, the bizarre twist in the case of Missouri's governor, his illicit affair, the former mistress who now may be changing her story. First, beyond our borders tonight, a U.S. aircraft carrier is sailing through the disputed South China Sea in the latest display of America's military might after China built a string of islands with military facilities in that strategic region. The U.S. Navy flew a small group of Philippine generals, officials, and journalists to the USS Theodore Roosevelt. China has expressed displeasure in the past of American shows of force there. North Korean state media says Kim Jong-un has briefed top ruling party officials on his vision for the future direction of dialogue with the U.S. The report did not specifically mention plans for Kim to hold a summit with President Trump, but it suggests his government is actively preparing for that meeting, a meeting that might happen in May or early June. A British health official says Yulia Skripal, who was targeted along with her father in the nerve agent attack in England, has been discharged from a hospital. The 33-year-old daughter of former spy Sergei Skripal has been taken to a secure location. Her father remains in the hospital but is said to be improving. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back. Senate Democrats say internal Environmental Protection Agency documents show no evidence of specific, credible physical threats against Administrator Scott Pruitt. That's despite administration claims of an unprecedented number of death threats to justify his security spending. Democrats on the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee say they reviewed confidential security assessments describing 16 purported threats. Pruitt's staff has cited death threats to rebut criticism of his first-class airline travel and a full-time security detail of 20 armed officers. Tonight, the EPA says it is not aware of any connection between the reported firing of an employee and his connection to the information cited by Democrats. Also talking about an email that goes against something that the EPA administrator said to our own Ed Henry about purchasing and renting an apartment here in D.C. We'll follow this story. There are new questions tonight about the already strange case involving Missouri's governor, an illicit affair, and the picture at the heart of the matter that may not even exist now. As it turns out, some of it might have been a dream. Of Correspondent Matt Finn does his best to explain it all.
The unidentified woman who alleged that during a 2015 consensual affair, Missouri Republican Governor Eric Greitens tied her to an exercise machine and took a picture of her on a smartphone, then threatened to blackmail her with it, now testified under oath that Greitens taking a picture of her could have been a dream. In a motion filed by Greitens' defense, when the woman identified as KS was questioned under oath by the defense about whether she remembers Greitens having a camera or phone during their encounter, the woman answered, "I haven't talked about it because I don't know if it's because I'm remembering it through a dream or I'm not sure. But yes, I feel like I saw it after that happened." The alleged picture is at the center of the criminal case against Greitens. The mistress's now ex-husband allegedly recorded the woman confessing the affair, in which she details Greitens taking the alleged picture.
And he stepped back and I saw a flash through the blindfold and he said, "You're never going to mention my name, otherwise these pictures will be everywhere."
The threat would amount to a misdemeanor, but the circuit attorney said the case fit the felony invasion of privacy statute when the picture was allegedly transferred to a computer. Governor Greitens' Facebook account posted a response, reading in part, "That's right, the information that was used to launch this witch hunt and indict on a felony involving an alleged photograph may have originated from a dream." The defense alleges prosecutorial misconduct, arguing the victim already told prosecutors that the photo could have been a dream, but they kept the case going. The prosecution says it complied with all discovery rules and is moving forward, and it argues the defense has cherry-picked portions of the victim's deposition to attack her credibility. A Missouri House committee that's investigating the governor's affair is set to release the results of its probe Wednesday. Bret?
Strange story. Matt, thank you. A report card tonight on one of President Trump's signature moves. Correspondent Doug McElroy reports on the president's sole appointment so far to the highest court in the land.
Today marks the first year on the bench for Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. There have been no unpleasant surprises for those who supported him.
Gorsuch always has impressed people as being a brilliant jurist, and we're looking forward to the first opinions that he's writing, which will really show his thinking on key issues.
And consternation among those opposed to him.
It's interesting to see exactly how he has voted in line with the most extreme conservative justice on the court.
In roughly 60 votes thus far, Gorsuch has been closely aligned with Justice Clarence Thomas, voting with him in 14 of 17 non-unanimous rulings. Three big decisions await on gerrymandering, the Trump travel ban, and a religious liberty case, Masterpiece Cake Shop versus the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. In December arguments, Gorsuch seemed troubled that Colorado civil rights law should force a Christian baker to violate his religious beliefs in baking a wedding cake for a gay couple and training his staff in such accommodation.
Because presumably he has to tell his staff, including his family members, that his Christian beliefs are discriminatory.
Gorsuch has proven himself an active, thoughtful questioner, though not as much now as when he first took the bench, observers say. Nor is he as aggressive as his predecessor, Antonin Scalia. But he bears an important similarity to Scalia, a belief in less is more. He reflects the Trump administration's priority for judicial picks, a preference for less activism, more interpretation of existing law. That's no comfort for progressives who note the stable of potential Trump court picks.
Considering that when Donald Trump was choosing who his justice would be, he had a list of 21 nominees, and Gorsuch was supposed to be the most moderate.
But it's music to the ears of conservatives.
If you follow appellate law and you look at the names that they're putting up there, it's an all-star cast.
Gorsuch appears to carry himself like the Coloradoan he is. Asked recently what he would be if not a lawyer, he said, a ski instructor and a fly fishing guide. Bret?
Doug, thank you. Next up, would President Trump fire Special Counsel Robert Mueller? What would happen if he did? Plus, a Syria decision and Facebook testimony. All of it with the panel when we come back.
So I just heard that they broke into the office of one of my personal attorneys.
Yesterday, we had the FBI raid the president's attorney's residence and his business and got information that's privileged information. What a double standard we see.
Mr. President, attorney-client privilege is alive and well, but there's an exception when the attorney might be involved in a crime or fraud.
It's part of a judicial process. We should let it work its way through.
Well, despite a lot of the day being taken up by the CEO of Facebook testifying on Capitol Hill, this is still a big story here in this town. And the president is weighing in on his personal attorney and the raid on his office and apartment or hotel room, tweeting, "Attorney-client privilege is dead," and a total witch hunt. Just a short time ago, Michael Cohen, that attorney, had a quote to CNN, quote, "I am unhappy to have my personal residence and office raided, but I will tell you that members of the FBI that conducted the search and seizure were all extremely professional, courteous, and respectful, and I thank them at the conclusion." You heard some of the pushback of this action. Here is Alan Dershowitz.
This is a very dangerous day today for lawyer-client relations. I deal with clients all the time. I tell them on my word of honor that what you tell me is sacrosanct. And now they say, just based on probable cause, even though this was cooperation with Cohen, they can burst into the office, grab all the computers, and then give it to another FBI agent and say, "You're the firewall."
Dershowitz is at the White House, we're told right now, had a meeting with President Trump and is apparently having dinner with him. Let's bring in our panel. Jonah Goldberg, senior editor at National Review, Mara Liasson, national political correspondent of National Public Radio, and Matthew Continetti, editor-in-chief of the Washington Free Beacon. Okay, Mara.
Well, this is an investigation that's getting awfully close to the president. I thought what was really interesting yesterday is you had some polite pushback from Republicans. You had Mitch McConnell saying the investigation should go forward. You had John Cornyn saying that Mueller's report should definitely be given to Congress, which is not required. You also had Chuck Grassley saying it would be suicide to talk about firing Mueller, and this comes after people who are talking to the president, outside advisors, are saying that he's as mad as he's ever been, and the idea of possibly firing Jeff Sessions is very, very live.
Sessions, Rosenstein.
Because that's the way you get rid of Mueller, right?
Rosenstein, really?
Well, Rosenstein or Sessions. You have to either replace the Attorney General with someone who's not recused, fire Rod Rosenstein. That's the way you get rid of the special counsel.
You've heard all kinds of punditry, Jonah, about this is a move that's kind of tangential to the Russia investigation, designed to have the president do what he's potentially contemplating doing, and that is fire Mueller, and thereby make the case for obstruction of justice pretty clear.
Yeah, but the funny thing about this, or the weird thing about this, is that forget whether it's political suicide or all those things, it would be pointless to fire Mueller because Mueller is not doing the Michael Cohen investigation. He handed it off to the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, who is not working for Mueller. If you fired Mueller, that thing continues to go. The only way you can get rid of that investigation is to fire the Trump-appointed interim director of the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Hold on 1 second. He recused himself.
Right. Oh, but you got to put somebody in there who will then kill this investigation. Politically, that is just, I mean, the optics of trying to make it all go away now, I just think are almost impossible. But maybe I'm wrong.
Maybe.
It's important to ask how President Trump found himself in this situation to begin with, and that was by firing James Comey. And after Comey's firing, Comey leaked the memos, which then led to the appointment of the special prosecutor. So now, if President Trump thinks he can fix the situation by firing the special prosecutor, it doesn't make much sense if the first firing led to only more problems for him.
There's one situation where maybe he could do this if the Republicans hold on to the House of Representatives. Then maybe he could fire him. Because if he fired him now, it would help Democrats, I think, in the election. And if Democrats took over, even if Mueller was fired, they'd probably have him up testifying 7 days a week.
Donald Trump has been a disruptor to Washington. He has everybody reacting to his actions, with one exception. Robert Mueller. He's the other disruptor. And the two of them now in combat could lead to a very combustible situation.
Well, it's definitely combustible. Speaking of combustible, the decision on Syria, we're told, is imminent if it's not already been made, and that some action may be imminent. Here's the president today.
We're making a decision as to what we do with respect to the horrible attack that was made near Damascus, and it will be met forcefully.
We speak today and we see the suffering of the Syrian people.
And me and the president, we see eye to eye that this matter has to stop immediately. We cannot tolerate with a war criminal. We cannot tolerate with someone who killed more than 500,000 of his own people. And this matter should end immediately.
They're meeting in the Oval Office with the Qatari Emir. As you remember, a short time ago, the President Mara said that Qatar was responsible for supporting terrorism. So quite a turnabout here.
How fast things change in Trump world, whether it's in foreign policy or ex-advisors. Everything is pretty fluid and flexible, as he likes to say.
But we do think that there is likely some imminent action.
I think there is. And to me, the question is it going to be like what he did almost exactly a year ago, where he hit an airfield, didn't seem to deter them from using chemical weapons again? Is it going to be something more? Take out the Syrian Air Force? That would risk a confrontation with Russia. You know, what's he going to do that will actually have a deterrent effect? Because the last thing he did didn't work.
Jonah.
Yeah, I mean, I think Donald Trump needs to do something. He didn't call it a red line, but by doing it the first time, he basically set a precedent that says, you know, if you're going to...
He did actually call it a red line the first time. He said there were a lot of red lines.
Oh, I guess that's right, yeah.
So, a lot of red lines.
My point is that it would be a loss of credibility for Donald Trump in the United States if he didn't do it now, and I think he's going to do it now, and he should do something now. What he does, I'm not sure. The real problem for me is Syria is just looking to be basically the Balkans of the 21st century with so many I mean, it's not even the Spanish Civil War anymore, which at least had two sides to it. The place is just a hot mess, and how we figure out a strategy about how to fix the place or do anything, or whether we should even try or at least minimize the damage, is very difficult to see. Russia feels like it is in their sphere of influence, and they have a lot more reputation and political capital invested in the place. And it's a thorny issue to figure out what we can do about it.
You know, Matthew, I've heard different pundits and different folks question whether this, in fact, was Syria who did this. I've talked to a number of officials who say they have pretty solid evidence and that they're going to be briefing as much as they can beyond the classified. You heard the president in the cabinet room saying, we have a good idea. This is probably going to happen.
I think so, and I think it's important for President Trump to understand that the logic of deterrence means that whatever action he takes will have to be larger than the action he took after the attack last year, which I do think deterred Assad for a time until he felt that the attention was no longer being paid. So the person to watch...
Donald Trump announced that we're going to pull out of Syria.
That's right. And the person to watch now, though, is Bolton, right, who's always been reluctant about involving us heavily in the Syrian civil war or changing the regime, but I do not think is averse to really kind of having the full might of the United States military raining down on the weaponry of Assad.
He's also not averse to shaking up the staff. We're told that Tom Bossert is leaving because John Bolton wants his own people there. If you take a look at the list of notable Trump administration resignations or firings, we are now up to the number of 31. Tom Bossert on the bottom right-hand corner there, Homeland Security Advisor being the latest. Huh?
Yeah, I don't think this is the same as Donald Trump firing someone. This is John Bolton, who, as the new National Security Advisor, gets to have his own people. He got rid of the spokesman for the National Security Council and now the Deputy National Security Advisor. He wants his own folks there, and he's going to get them.
Happens all the time. Yeah. Lot to cover. When we come back, one more status update on that Facebook hearing.